The elders always said, a secret kept too long will one day walk into the light, whether the owner is ready or not. Rachel never believed those words, not even on the night she held her newborn son and cried until her tears dried on her cheeks. She thought time would bury the past, hide the truth, and silence the memories she carried. Memories of Jason, the only man who ever touched her heart in a way that left both sweetness and wounds. For 5 years, Rachel lived quietly, raising her son Toby with love, caution, and the hidden fear that someone somewhere might one day ask the question she dreaded. Every morning she woke before dawn, prepared their small room, whispered prayers, and carried on as if her world did not rely on a single truth she refused to share. But in the stillness of each night, when the wind brushed the windows and old women told stories by moonlight, she always heard one echo in her mind. A child who does not know his father carries a shadow on his back. She tried to dismiss those words, but the shadow followed her, waiting for its moment to grow wings. Rachel did her best to give Toby everything: warm meals, old but clean clothes, stories passed down from her grandmother, and gentle lessons about kindness and respect. People in the village admired her strength, but they also whispered behind her back, wondering who fathered the boy. Some said the child looked like an ancestor reborn. Others said he carried the face of a man from a distant town, while a few blunt elders believed Rachel was hiding something greater than heartbreak. Rachel ignored them. She learned long ago that village tongues could slice deeper than knives. Yet each time she looked at Toby's bright eyes and saw Jason's face there, she felt the ground tremble under her calm. She told herself the past was gone, Jason was gone, their love was gone, and nothing would ever bring him back into her life again. But fate, like an old drummer, waits patiently for the right time to beat its drum. Everything began to change on a humid afternoon when Toby returned from playing outside and complained of a strange pain in his stomach. Rachel thought it was the usual child sickness. Perhaps he had eaten unripe fruit or played too long under the hot sun, but the way he groaned made her uneasy. She touched his forehead, and the heat rising from his skin frightened her. Panic gripped her heart. She hurried to the backyard where Mama Keke, the oldest grandmother in the compound, was sitting and shelling groundnuts. The old woman looked at Toby and shook her head slowly, her eyes holding that strange, ancient wisdom that always made Rachel uncomfortable. "My daughter, sometimes a sickness is not just sickness. There are deep matters that come with blood and truth." Rachel wanted to argue, but her heart was too heavy. Instead, she carried Toby inside, hoping sleep would calm him. But the night that followed changed everything. Toby's fever grew stronger. His breathing became uneven. He cried in his sleep, calling out strange words Rachel could not understand. At one point, he woke, looked around the room with confusion, and asked softly, "Mommy, where is Daddy? I saw someone calling me." Rachel froze. Her hand shook. She felt a cold wind pass through the room, even though all the windows were locked. The elders always said children could hear what adults refused to acknowledge. Rachel did not sleep the rest of the night. She sat beside her son, praying with trembling lips. Just before sunrise, she decided she could no longer rely on herbs and hopeful wishes. She wrapped Toby in a cloth, held him tight, and prepared to take him to the nearest hospital in the city. Even if it cost her everything, she needed her son alive. As she stepped outside, she met the village priest, Baba Aware, who was returning from morning prayers. When he saw Rachel carrying the boy, he paused and studied them with deep concern. "You can run from a man, but you cannot run from destiny. A hidden father is like a buried drum. One day it will beat on its own." Rachel tried to walk past him, but her legs felt heavy. She knew the old priest spoke in riddles, but she also knew his words often carried truth. She bowed her head respectfully and hurried away before he could say more. Her heart pounded against her ribs, each beat reminding her of the truth she had buried for years. She whispered to herself, "I would not think of Jason. I will only focus on saving Toby." But the moment she mentioned his name, a wave of memories flooded her mind. Jason's laughter, his promises, their painful breakup, and the day she found out she was pregnant and swore never to tell him. By the time Rachel reached the hospital, her emotions were tangled like a fishing net. She rushed inside, calling for help. Nurses hurried towards her, carrying Toby into the emergency room. Rachel followed closely, tears blurring her vision.
The smell of disinfectant filled the air, mixing with her fear. She felt small inside the large white walled building, like a child lost in a maze. She stood outside the ward, praying silently. Then she heard something that made her heart stumble. A nurse mentioning a name. "Dr. Jason will handle that case," the nurse said casually, flipping through a file. Rachel almost dropped her bag. Her ears rang, her breath caught in her throat. She told herself she must have misheard. Jason? No, this word was too large for fate to be this cruel. She convinced herself it must be a different Jason. Many men had that name. It couldn't be him. It shouldn't be him. Minutes later, a young nurse approached her with a polite smile. "Madam, the doctor in charge is ready to see you and the child. Please follow me." Rachel wiped her face, adjusted her wrapper, and tried to steady her shaking legs. Her mind raced with memories she never wanted to revisit. As she walked down the corridor, each step echoed like a drumbeat of destiny. The air felt cold, her palms were sweaty. She kept whispering to herself, "It's not him, it's not him." But her heart refused to agree. When she reached the door, the nurse gently opened it and stepped aside for Rachel to enter. Rachel took a deep breath. Clutching her son's folded card, she pushed the door open, and there he was. Jason, standing tall in a white doctor's coat, his eyes fixed on her with shock that mirrored her own, as if he had seen a ghost step into his consulting room. The world fell silent. Rachel's knees weakened. Her secret had finally walked into the light.
Jason's eyes widened as he stared at Rachel, the years of separation and pain flashing across his face in a single heartbeat. He could not speak at first. His mind raced with memories, the laughter they shared under the moonlight, the tears they cried when they parted, the promises that were broken, and the silent nights he spent wondering where she had gone. Rachel, too, was frozen, her son cradled tightly in her arms. Toby looked up at Jason with curious, innocent eyes, unaware of the storm swirling in the room. The child had never seen his father, and yet his small face seemed to recognize something deep, as if a forgotten spirit called him home. In that moment, the hospital walls felt thin, almost like paper. Secrets, Rachel realized, could not be confined. They seeped through cracks, following destiny wherever it chose to go. Jason finally found his voice, though it was low and measured, trembling with disbelief. "Rachel, is that really you?" he asked, his gaze shifting between her and the boy she held. Rachel's heart hammered in her chest. She wanted to step back, to disappear into the white corridors, to hide behind lies she had carried for years. But Toby whimpered softly in her arms, as if pleading for her mother to stay. "Yes, it's me," she said quietly. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "And this is Toby." She held him out for Jason to see. The boy blinked, then smiled faintly, his tiny hand reaching for Jason. For a moment, Jason felt a strange pull in his chest, a mixture of fear, disbelief, and a longing he had never dared to acknowledge. The resemblance hit him like a striking drumbeat. Toby's eyes, so wide and bright, mirrored his own in ways that could not be ignored. He stepped closer, but Rachel instinctively moved back, shielding her son. "He's sick," she said, her voice tight with worry. "I need you to help him." Jason, though a doctor, noticed more than just Toby's fever. Something in the child's aura unsettled him, a faint, restless energy that seemed to cling to the boy, as though a shadow followed him from birth. He recalled the village sayings his grandmother had once whispered. A child's spirit always leans toward its bloodline. Jason had laughed at such tales in his youth, but standing there now, he could not dismiss the truth simmering in the air.
He instructed the nurses to prepare for tests and began examining Toby with meticulous care. Rachel watched, tense and silent, each movement of Jason stirring a storm inside her. She wanted to run, to hide the years of secrecy, but she could not leave her son's side. Toby's fever burned higher, and she whispered softly, almost pleading, "Please, save him." Hours passed, and the hospital room became a stage of emotions, memories, and whispered warnings. Jason worked tirelessly, calling for more tests, adjusting medications, checking vitals, and analyzing blood samples. He noticed Toby's strange reactions to certain treatments, a heightened sensitivity, almost as if his body was resisting interventions from which it should benefit. Folktale stories from Jason's youth crept into his mind. Spirits bound to unacknowledged bloodlines could cause sickness, misfortune, or unrest until the truth was revealed. He frowned and looked at Rachel, who met his gaze with wide, fearful eyes. "Rachel, I think we need a DNA test," he said slowly, weighing each word. "For his safety, for treatment." Rachel stiffened. Her heart leapt into her throat. "Jason, you don't need that. Please, just treat him," she said very quietly, her voice trembling. I can explain everything later." But Jason, determined and cautious, shook his head. "No, I need to know. It's the only way to help him fully." She could feel the walls closing in. The truth she had hidden for 5 years hovered dangerously close, ready to leap out and demand acknowledgement. As the tests were conducted, memories flooded both their minds. Jason remembered the passionate days with Rachel, the betrayal he imagined when she left, the emptiness that followed. Rachel remembered the day she discovered she was pregnant, the fear of telling Jason, and the constant worry about raising a child alone in a world where blood ties mattered. And Toby, small and fragile, seemed to sense the tension, curling into her mother's arms as if shielding her from unseen forces. That night, as the hospital corridors emptied and the moonlight spilled through tall windows, Rachel finally spoke, her voice quiet but trembling. "Jason, I never wanted you to know. I was afraid of what you would do if you found out. I thought I was protecting you, protecting Toby, protecting myself." Jason listened in silence, his fingers tight on the boy's tiny hand. The room felt heavy with unsaid words, ancestral warnings, and the weight of destiny itself.
The DNA results arrived quietly, carried in a sealed envelope, the paper crisp and cold under Jason's fingers. He hesitated before opening it. A chill ran down his spine, and he felt as if the air itself had grown thicker, the shadows longer. Jason recalled the old stories his grandmother told him. When truth stands before you, do not turn away. Face it and you may find peace. Hide it and suffering will multiply. He knew he had no choice. He unfolded the envelope slowly. The numbers and words on the page were simple, clinical, yet they shook him to his core. His eyes scanned the results, and then the world seemed to stop. Toby was his son. The resemblance, the energy, the unexplainable sensitivity, it all made sense now. Jason whispered, almost to himself, "Toby is my son." He looked up, his heart pounding, expecting Rachel to respond, but the room was eerily quiet. And then he noticed something unusual, something that made the old folktale fears crawl up his spine. From the corner of his eye, he saw a shadow shifting unnaturally, almost glowing in the faint moonlight. Jason turned slowly. But before he could fully process, the shadow flickered and seemed to take the form of a figure, a silhouette with eyes that shimmered strangely, like they carried the weight of a warning. The air in the room grew colder. Toby stirred in Rachel's arms, sensing a disturbance he could not name. Rachel too felt it, an energy beyond human understanding, as if ancestors themselves were peering into the room, demanding that the hidden truth be faced. "Jason, what is it?" Rachel whispered, clutching her son tighter. Jason did not answer immediately. His hand shook slightly as he held the DNA result. It's him," he said finally, his voice low but firm. "This child is mine." Rachel gasped, her eyes filling with tears, yet before she could speak, the glowy shadow seemed to move closer, its presence almost alive, urging them to acknowledge what had been hidden for so long. The weight of years, secrets, and fear pressed down on them all. Neither of them noticed the soft murmur that began in the room, like the faint whisper of 100 voices. The blood calls, the truth must be seen, the shadow walks where lies hide. The whispers grew louder, circling Toby, binding him with invisible threads of fate. Rachel trembled. "Jason, do you see it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Jason nodded slowly, his mind struggling to grasp what was happening. He had heard of such occurrences in village tales. Children whose fathers were hidden, spirits that haunted the living to demand justice, and warnings that could not be ignored. He reached out, gently placing a hand on Rachel's shoulder. We need to face this," he said, trying to steady his voice. "For Toby, for all of us." Rachel swallowed hard, nodding, knowing deep inside that the time for hiding, for secrecy, for fear was over. And just as they both turned to confront the shadow, the hospital lights flickered violently. The glowing eyes disappeared from sight, leaving only the chill of emptiness and a silence that felt alive. A sudden knock came from the door, soft but deliberate. Jason's heart skipped. Rachel held Toby closer, her body tense as a warning bell rang in her chest. The shadows in the room stretched unnaturally, creeping towards them like living fingers. Outside, a figure waited, someone who might hold the next piece of their destiny. Jason and Rachel exchanged the glance, both knowing that the next step could change everything. The secret that had walked back into the light was not done yet. The shadow, the whispers, the revelations, they were only the beginning. And in that moment, the world seemed to pause. The hallway outside the hospital seemed colder than the night air, and the faint glow from the figure Jason had seen flickered like candlelight in the storm. Rachel tightened her hold on Toby, who stared in her arms, sensing the strange energy. Jason stepped forward cautiously, his medical training struggling against the unease that had rooted him to the spot. The shadow had disappeared when the light stabilized, leaving only a sense of presence, something neither human nor entirely spirit. Rachel's lips trembled as she finally whispered what she had hidden for so long. "Jason, I'm sorry. I didn't tell you about Toby because I was afraid of losing you again, afraid of your anger, afraid of everything." Her voice broke and tears rolled freely down her cheeks. "I thought I was protecting everyone, but now I see I only delayed the truth." Jason's hand trembled as he held the DNA result. His heart thudded heavily against his ribs. For a long moment, silence hung between them like a heavy fog, thick with emotions, regrets, and ancestral warnings. He remembered the words of Baba Owere, the village priest, who had once told him, "When the truth stands before you, do not run. Face it with courage, and the spirits will guide your steps." Jason realized that this was one of those moments. The shadows, the glowing eyes, the whispered warnings, they were not threats, but signals, calling them to acknowledge what had been hidden. He knelt beside Toby, carefully observing the boy. His small face reflected innocence, fear, and an unspoken need for love and recognition. "Toby, my son, I am here now." Toby's eyes widened slightly, and he reached out with a tiny hand, resting it against Jason's. Rachel felt her chest tighten at the sight. The child's body seemed to relax under his father's touch, as though a piece of his spirit recognized the bloodline he had been denied for so long. Jason turned to Rachel, his voice steady now, but carrying the weight of years of hurt. "Rachel, you should have told me earlier. Not for me, but for him. A child suffers more when his father is hidden than when truths are revealed." Rachel nodded, swallowing hard. She knew this deep down, but fear had always chained her tongue. "I know. I was wrong," she said softly. "I see it now. Toby has been carrying a weight I could never lift alone." The hospital lights flickered again, faintly, but this time they did not cast shadows of warning. Instead, the air felt lighter, warmer. The room seemed to breathe with them, acknowledging the truth at last. Jason suggested they conduct thorough medical and spiritual care for Toby, combining his medical knowledge with the wisdom Rachel remembered from the village elders. They called Baba Owere over, who brought his gentle chants and blessings. "A child's blood speaks," the priest said solemnly, circling the room. "When the father is known and the mother is truthful, the spirit finds peace. The sickness will lessen, the shadow will recede." Rachel watched amazed at how the combination of science, faith, and ancestral guidance began to calm the restless energy surrounding her son. As the hours passed, Toby's fever slowly receded. He slept peacefully in his mother's arms, and even the tension in the room seemed to dissipate. Jason stayed nearby, holding Rachel's hand for a brief moment, a silent acknowledgement that they had survived the storm of secrecy together. Neither spoke of the past bitterness, but the unspoken understanding flowed between them. They had been separated by fear, lies, and pain, but here they were, bound together by the child who carried their blood, their mistakes, and their hope. The elders' sayings, once dismissed as superstitions, now felt real. The child who walks with hidden blood will trip on shadows. The child who walks with known blood will stride in sunlight. By the next morning, Rachel and Jason sat together in the hospital garden, watching Toby toddle slightly under the careful eyes of the nurses. Jason had suggested co-parenting arrangements, and Rachel had agreed. "We will not be together as lovers again," Jason said quietly, "but we can raise him properly. He deserves that." Rachel nodded, a tear of relief sliding down her cheek. "Yes, he does, and we can do it together." For the first time in years, both felt peace settle over their hearts. The ancient whispers, the glowing shadow, and the hidden fears had all led them here, towards understanding, forgiveness, and reconciliation. A week later, Baba Owere visited them again. "You have faced the truth," he said, nodding approvingly. "You have honored the child and the blood that binds him. Remember this, secrets may shelter you for a while, but they are like seeds in the dark. Eventually,
They grow roots and demand sunlight. Jason and Rachel bowed their heads, silently promising that they would honor Toby and the truth from this day onwards. Even the hospital staff noticed the difference in the atmosphere. Toby smiled more, laughed more, and seemed stronger, as if the recognition of his father's love had given him a vitality he had never known. It was as though the spirits themselves had smiled upon the reunion. In the following months, Jason and Rachel established a balanced routine for their son. They shared responsibilities, attended medical checkups together, and nurtured Toby with a blend of discipline, love, and traditional wisdom. The villagers who had once whispered behind Rachel's back now marveled at the child's vitality and growth. Even Mama Kike, the grandmother, remarked, "Truth and courage bring peace to both the living and the spirit world. You have done well, my children." Jason and Rachel never forgot the events of that fateful night in the hospital. The glowing shadow, the whispers, the DNA revelation. But instead of fear, they carried it as a reminder that honesty, however difficult, was the strongest medicine. One quiet evening, as they all sat beneath the shade of a sprawling tree near the hospital, Toby played happily in the soft grass, laughing without fear. Rachel looked at Jason, gratitude in her eyes. "I was so afraid," she said softly, "afraid that the truth would destroy us all. But it seems it has done the opposite." Jason nodded. "The truth doesn't destroy, Rachel. It heals. It binds what is broken and shows the way forward." They watched Toby run towards them, small feet pounding the earth, his laughter ringing like a melody that carried the weight of their past and the promise of the future. And in that laughter, both saw clearly what the elders had always meant. A child's life, their happiness, and their spirit are intertwined with honesty, love, and acknowledgement. As the sun set over the distant horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the hospital courtyard, Rachel whispered a prayer of thanks to the ancestors, to the spirits, and to the universe itself. She had faced fear, confessed her secret, and reclaimed the life she had once hidden. Jason, standing beside her, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. They were no longer lovers bound by past mistakes, but they were united in purpose and truth. Together, they would raise Toby with love, wisdom, and courage, the kind that only comes from acknowledging one's mistakes, embracing the truth, and letting the child walk freely in the light of their love and honesty. Moral lesson: truth may be painful, but lies are heavier to carry. When parents hide the truth, the child suffers the most. Courage, honesty, and acknowledgement heal both the living